Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn. And this is episode number 759 of the podcast. And it is Sunday, the 30th of June, 2024, as I record this, in the middle of the year. So yes, maybe time to look at how far you are through your creative goals for the year. In today's show, I'm talking to Aurora Winter about her journey from running a yacht business into writing screenplays and working in film and TV and into writing books. How writing and gratitude can help with grief and difficult times, why writing a book instead of a screenplay might be more likely to get you a film or TV deal, tips for pitching, the importance of self-development, different business models for fiction and non-fiction, outsourcing tips for virtual assistants, and more. So that's coming up in the interview section. In publishing and book marketing things, Written Word Media has an article on 100 book marketing ideas for authors, but don't worry, you don't have to do it all, and in fact you shouldn't even try to do it all. I thought I'd mention it because there are lots of these listicles out there, and before you do anything, I think a lot of them are very useful. In fact, I have my own book, How to Market a Book, right? But before you do anything around actions on book marketing, you need to have a think about your situation, who you are, what you want to achieve, what your personality's like, what your book is, and also whether this is a long-term career for you, or you're just putting out one or two, maybe even 3 books. But this will shape how you do marketing, because if you want a long-term career, then you do things quite differently. So there are some foundational elements grouped under online presence in this Written Word Media article, some kind of website that is separate to your social media, an email list, the usual suspects. But if you wonder why, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I'll just direct people to my TikTok account or to my Facebook page or to one of these other places. Well, it is about control. If you don't control a site, and let's face it, none of us control social media, they can change the rules, and in fact they probably will. The longer you're around, the longer you recognise that every single one of these sites changes the rules, and then you have no choice or ability to reach readers in a different way. So remember, especially if you're thinking about a long-term career, these sites don't last forever. So having some kind of website that you own and control is important. Now, I do think you need at least a presence on one or 2 social media sites, even if you don't want to be that active or use it even for paid marketing. I think a lot about this at the moment because I'm thinking about proving that I am a human. And this idea of the sort of social graph and who you're connected to, how long, I guess, your accounts have been around. Did they exist pre-AI? Now, of course, you might be a real human listening. I'm assuming you're a real human listening, actually. And you're like, yeah, but I only started this year, in which case we're in the age of AI. There are AI avatars out there. TikTok, for example, has introduced AI avatars. You won't be able to tell, many of you won't be able to tell right now what is a real human. So I think about social media now as, how do I put stuff out there that is not just about marketing, that is really about building up a profile of me as a real person? And this is also part of that, putting my voice out there. But because I really don't do that much video, I put pictures on Instagram that are a lot about my personal stuff rather than marketing. Now, I do use them for marketing, absolutely, but it's not all about marketing. So, for example, I did this stone carving thing that I mentioned last week. I think I mentioned it last week. I sent it out to my newsletter, but I put pictures on Instagram of me doing stone carving and my finished thing, which is now in the garden with the flowers. Now, if you were creating that picture with AI, you would make it a lot better. If you do stone carving picture of a green man on Midjourney or something, it's going to look a heck of a lot better than my stone carving. But mine is very human. So there you go. And there's a picture of me looking very proud holding it. Now, I put that on Instagram, not because I'm trying to sell stone carving. It's to show you that I'm human. Now, I didn't do it in order to post Instagram pictures either. I did it for other reasons. But this is the point. With social media, it is not just about book marketing. In my mind, it is increasingly about attracting people who are interested in things we are. And proving we're human. So there you go. Also, you can set up some things. So my Instagram at JFPennAuthor, I post photos there. They automatically post through to Facebook at JFPennAuthor. And then I have a Zap set up. You're on their free plan. I don't have to pay for this. I have a Zap that posts from Facebook, JFPennAuthor, to Facebook at The Creative Penn, which just brings an element of personality into that page without me having to do it manually. So just to remind people, I am real. So there's some things to think about. Back to the written word media article, there are lots of sections: content marketing, social media, traditional media, community, online paid advertising, networking, events, reader engagement, and much more. So definitely have a look through the list, although it's quite a high level list, so you'd need to dive deeper into each thing. But spend more time thinking before acting. Don't just jump into scheduling a whole load of stuff on social media. Find examples of authors you respect who are using certain ways of marketing and model them. And consider what's right for you and your books and your personality and your lifestyle. So, for example, there is no point thinking that what is right for a 35-year-old writing romantasy using TikTok to make serious bank, that might not be right for a 65-year-old writing historical fiction who is not looking for a full-time income. So this is another thing. If you're not looking to make a full-time income as an author or significant income, a lot of this marketing stuff you could just leave by the wayside. So check out the article from Written Word Media, but assess all tips through the lens of your situation. There's another tips post from the self-publishing advice blog, 25 indie author tips to finding success. And I think they missed a step, because number one should be decide what is success for you. This is so important because, again, just going back to that previous example, a 35-year-old who wants to make a full-time income with romantasy is different to someone who is in later stages of life who doesn't necessarily need the money. Although, of course, some people later in life do need the money. I'm not saying that's different, but we are different people at different stages of our lives. So for me, in terms of success, back when I started in 2008 and I was a 35-year-old wanting to leave my job, the success was actually, how old was I? Yeah, around then. Success was being able to leave my job as an IT consultant and make the same amount of income from my author business. And that took a number of years. That took 5 years to get to that point. Then making it a sustainable living, so I didn't have to go back to a job. That was the next kind of goal, and I feel like I am there now. And now it's more like measuring my life by what I create and continuing to make a full-time income and to serve my community by continuing to be useful. I measure this very much by listeners, by patrons, by not even by book sales anymore. Like for my nonfiction side, it's very much about listeners on this show and my Patreon community. If I am not useful, I will stop doing this. So, yeah, I certainly measure this as a level of success. For now, it seems I am still useful, so I'm sticking around. Back to the post on self-publishing advice. There are some good tips from different indie authors. One says, give yourself time. Everything takes longer than you expect. So always add in a buffer so you don't put yourself under pressure. That is true. Whatever you're doing, whether you're writing your first book, editing, publishing, finding an agent if you want to go that way, book marketing, getting reviews, all of this kind of thing. Another tip, if a tool doesn't serve you, stop using it. This is very good because there are many tools that we all use, some of which are amazing and some of which you use for a while and then you stop using. And we need to revisit the subscriptions we use because so many of these are monthly payments. So this is definitely worth doing. Cancel them if you need to or if they are not a good fit. This is one of the reasons I don't like doing the annual payments. You know, they say pay by month or get a reduction if you pay annually. Now, I do this. I'm now thinking I actually do this for those services that I know I will continue to use. But for other ones, I'm like, I'm not really sure. So I do a monthly payment because sometimes I need to cancel, even if it's a bit more. Also, someone says, remember the saying, look after the pennies and the pounds look after themselves. Well, I recently applied that to followers and newsletter subscribers. Instead of aiming to recruit hundreds and being disappointed when I don't, I'm enjoying seeing people trickle on board. Quality over quantity. And that principle applies to reviews as well as building email and sales as well. When you start, you think, oh my goodness, this is just a bit of a nightmare. I am nowhere. But it takes months, it takes years, and yeah, things can happen. In other useful things, BookFunnel for audiobooks is now out of beta, so it's available for everyone. Now, I've been using it for several years now in the beta, and it's been brilliant for selling audio direct, for filling Kickstarters. It is fantastic, really useful. And that's why I was thinking BookFunnel is one of those services I pay my annual subscription for very happily because it is fantastic. You can do audiobook bundling, ebook bundling. You can do so many things with BookFunnel, and I love it for audio. The BookFunnel app is great for listening, and personally, I now listen across multiple apps. I use Spotify, I use Audible, and I use BookFunnel. You can offer much better deals for listeners selling direct than the credit systems of the main audio platforms. So if you were in the beta program, as I was, you do need to go into your account and choose a plan. If you haven't got it yet and you want to get it, now's the time. There is an early adopter rate until 19th of August 2024. Also on BookFunnel, and for those into direct sales, there's a really interesting article from Katie Cross on the BookFunnel blog about using a BookFunnel landing page for Facebook ads rather than her Shopify store. And the conversion was better. Now, this is fascinating because I'm going to revisit this for myself as I've been running Facebook ads direct to Shopify. Well, I was doing that before the Kickstarter campaign, and now that was my focus, and I will be getting back to this. Katie concludes, go read the whole article, links in the show notes, but Katie concludes, when running traffic ads in particular, though the same was true for purchase campaigns as well, BookFunnel pulled in more subscribers. For someone running direct sales like myself, these leads are of a higher quality because their familiarity with BookFunnel makes it easier to sell to them later. They already have the audiobook player and e-reader of choice from my website. In other words, it decreases a potential friction point for future sales. This is such a great point because the more of us who use BookFunnel for direct sales, the easier it will be because people get used to it and then it's not even a question. I mean, I remember years ago before Damon made BookFunnel and we all had to do this manually, it was a nightmare. Then BookFunnel started and then a lot of readers understand BookFunnel, but listeners is still relatively new. BookFunnel also allows you to put your pixel into any landing page, decreasing concerns over running traffic to someone else's website. I can still retarget anyone who clicked on the link and viewed the BookFunnel page later. So if you don't understand that, no worries. It's a bit more advanced book marketing for paid ads. But yeah, this is great. I'm definitely going to be looking at this. They've also got a webinar series. So yeah, links in the show notes, but that is the BookFunnel blog. In AI and publishing news, the latest publisher and news media to sign a deal with OpenAI is Time magazine. The blog post says Time and OpenAI announce a multi-year content deal and strategic partnership to bring Time's trusted journalism to OpenAI's products, including ChatGPT. Through this collaboration, OpenAI will gain access to current and historic content from Time's archives from the last 101 years to enhance its products and display in response to user inquiries with a link back to the original source. The partnership will also enable Time to gain access to OpenAI's technology to develop new products for its audiences, along with the opportunity to provide vital feedback and share practical applications to refine and enhance the delivery of journalism in ChatGPT and other products. So that is a lot of licensing deals with media companies. In the last month or so, it's included the Financial Times in the UK, The Atlantic, News Corp, Vox Media, Reddit, Le Monde, and more. Which is why I am excited about the ALCS here in the UK, which is the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, which basically collects money for things like photocopying and library borrowing and other things. Now, it has issued a survey to get authors' opinions on seeking a licensing deal. And they say, What you choose to do with your works is entirely your choice. However, we strongly believe that the best option for writers is a collective solution. I absolutely agree. A licensing deal through one collecting society would be far simpler for writers to administer. Collective bargaining would give us a strong negotiating position and allow us to achieve better terms for writers. Finally, a collective solution ensures that writers, visual artists and publishers would all be remunerated fairly. Basically, if you decide to opt in for licensing your data, you could get paid for it. Now, I'm thrilled about this, and this is actually what I suggested in my 2020 book on AI for authors in the publishing industry, which is still slowly coming true. I said, creative works in copyright should be licensed for machine learning, and the original creators compensated with either a one-off license fee or a micropayment facilitated by blockchain smart contracts. There's still a lot of work on blockchain and AI stuff. Hasn't come to pass as yet, but it's still happening. I also said this kind of process would ensure that copyright does not prevent the development of AI intelligence, that machine learning models are trained on diverse works, and that original creators can continue to be rewarded throughout the publishing supply chain, from original products to all kinds of possible derivative works. It could significantly expand the earning potential for creators and rights holders. So I saw licensing as the answer then, and I still see it now. If you are in the UK and registered with the ALCS, please do the survey. You don't have to agree with me, of course, but please do the survey and put your opinion in. If you are in the UK and you are not registered with the ALCS, however you publish, please make sure you register, because you might be leaving money on the table. In this way, you can get paid for library borrows and all kinds of things, and maybe AI licensing in the future. In personal news, I am just back from a holiday week in Corfu, just a relaxing beach week where I basically read a book a day and swam in the blue sea, and it was perfect. And in fact, there is a picture on Instagram with my blue nail polish and the sea. Just what we needed to re-energise for the second half of the year. Now, I don't just read beach reads. I read In My Time of Dying by Sebastian Junger, which is a real memento mori book. So interesting. And yes, that is the kind of book I like to read on holiday on the beach. Here is a quote from it, which I really loved and what might make you think today. It's an open question whether a full and unaverted look at death crushes the human psyche or liberates it. One could say that it's the small ambitions of life that shred our souls, and that if we're lucky enough to glimpse the gargoyles of our final descent and make it back alive, we are truly saved. I love that. I love gargoyles of our final descent. That's the kind of thing that would inspire a short story or something for me. I love gargoyles. Of course I do. I love Gothic cathedrals. But so that is In My Time of Dying by Sebastian Junger. On the opposite end of the scale, I did read a whole load of fiction as well. I also read Eruption, which is James Patterson wrote for Michael Crichton's estate. When he died, Michael Crichton left a ton of notes and research and the story for the book, which is about a very, very big eruption in Hawaii and what happens. And while I absolutely respect James Patterson as an author entrepreneur, I mean, he really is the top-selling, top-earning, best-loved author in terms of mass market. People love his books. I don't really read him that much. I've read a few of his books, but not really my thing usually. But I love Michael Crichton. I've read all Michael Crichton's books. And it was a really strange read because I've read enough of Patterson to kind of know his style, and I've read enough of Crichton to know his style. And I could sense these elements of Michael Crichton. Now, maybe he left big chunks of text that went in there, but also the structure and the writing style and the pacing was certainly James Patterson's. Now, it is a really good thing to help support Michael Crichton's family and his estate, and it was lovely to read the notes at the back from Michael Crichton's wife thanking James Patterson. But it was not a Crichton book. Definitely was not a Crichton book. And it made me think, if I die unexpectedly, would I want all my works in progress to die with me? What do you think? I'd love to know what you think. Would you trust anyone, even someone of James Patterson's level? Would you trust them to finish your book in progress? I don't know. In other personal news, I will start fulfilling the Kickstarter for Spear of Destiny this week. I'm still waiting on some addresses so I can order the print book. So if you are a backer and you haven't done your survey yet, please do that for my campaign or anyone else's that you backed, because hold-ups with surveys is definitely one of the most painful things about fulfillment. Also, my short story, De-Extinction of the Nephilim, is out everywhere today. If you like the idea of an archaeological thriller blended with a techno thriller, it is a longish short story with, of course, a twist at the end, because I always love tales of the unexpected. And Roald Dahl's short stories are kind of they're the sort of top of my list as to what I aim to do. I also narrate the audio. If you'd like me to read you the story, should be on all the usual audio things, or jfpennbooks.com, where you can find it from me. So thanks for your emails and comments and photos this week. Kim Brockway said on YouTube about Rochelle Ayala's AI interview, another wonderful and informative episode. Thanks, Joe and Rochelle. Lots of new things for me to have fun playing with. Glad you enjoyed it, Kim. Also, Moonstone1159 said on YouTube, I'm interested in AI writing tools for research and historical context, but I too worry about the question of human voice and the loss of creativity when using AI. Thank you for an informative and interesting interview. I definitely think the loss of creativity is not a worry at all, because when I use these AI tools, it's like a load of fireworks going off in my head. It's like sparking backwards and forwards. And in fact, I get so tired with all my creative ideas that I have to stop using it. So yeah, I think the loss of creativity is not a thing. If you can tap into your curiosity, these tools supercharge it. Absolutely. What is different is the human voice and whether working with AI tools changes you. But in the same way, all these other things change us. I mean, if you use any kind of social media, it's going to change you. You will absolutely. If you read any particular traditional media, newspapers, if you watch certain TV shows, if you're a particular political persuasion. Now, I'm not going to talk about politics this week. We have an election here in the UK, and France is very interesting, and the USA is very interesting. That's all I'm going to say on politics. But yes, we all get affected by all kinds of things, and I think this will just go into the mix. On Efren Delgado's interview, Geroribus Prime said, this was a really inspiring podcast. Keep up the good work. And finally, Aninka said, I love this. Aninka said, I was driving while listening to your latest episode and my view was the backs of other cars. I became jealous of the description of photos from other listeners, so I decided to go out to my backyard forest in Connecticut later and take some nature shots of a more Creative Penn podcast-worthy listening place. Sent a lovely picture of a green wooded path. Now, I am very happy to receive photos of the back of other cars when you're in a traffic jam. Obviously, do not get out your phone to take a picture while you're driving. But no, I love to see where you're listening. I get pictures sent from the gym, doing the washing up, doing the washing. Absolutely. So yes, please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, send me pictures of where you're listening, however ugly it is. Joanna at thecreativepenn.com. I love to hear from you. It makes this more of a conversation. So today's show is sponsored by Draft2 Digital, self-publishing with support. And this is definitely one of the great reasons you might choose to publish through Draft2 Digital. They have a customer service team who can actually help you rather than ignoring your emails. And sometimes that's just what you need, because self-publishing can be a little overwhelming and sometimes you just need some personal help. So through Draft2 Digital, you can publish ebooks to all the big platforms as well as library systems. You can also publish print books. They can help you through that process too. They have formatting tools as well as an easy publishing system. I use Draft2 Digital for my ebook distribution to Nook, library systems, and now even to Apple, because it's a lot easier to manage when you publish wide as I do. I also use the excellent payment splitting for my co-written book, The Relaxed Author, with Mark Leslie Lefebvre, which is a great option if you are co-writing or doing an anthology. There are no charges for uploading, formatting, or updating your book. Draft to Digital take a distributor 10% of retail price on sale, so there are no fees. Set your price to whatever you want, even free. Make as many changes as you want for your book, update the cover, distribute to any and every sales channel you want. It's your book, your choice, your world. They also have marketing tools and promotional opportunities available for the various platforms, which you get emails about as they come up. Draft to Digital says, your book is your priority. Our priority is you. We build tools and services that let you focus on writing while we take care of layout, publishing, distribution, print-on-demand paperbacks and more. Check them out at draft2digital.com. That's with a number 2, draft2digital.com. So this type of corporate sponsorship pays for the hosting, transcription and editing, but my time in creating the show is sponsored by my community on patreon.com/The Creative Penn. Thanks to the 10 new patrons who've joined this week, and thanks to everyone who've been supporting for months and years. If you join the community, you get access to my backlist videos and audio covering topics on creativity and AI, mindset and author business and marketing, and my patron-only Q&A solo podcast episodes. Yes, you get the entire backlist, so you can have a listen to lots of extra audio. Last week, I put out a video on your author business initial investment and costs, including my various expenses. The Patreon is a monthly subscription, the equivalent of buying me a black coffee a month or a couple of coffees if you're feeling generous. And you get access to everything, all the backlist content and Q&As if you join us. So if you feel you get value from the show and you want more, come on over and join us. Thanks again to everyone. You can join us at patreon.com, patreon.com/The Creative Penn. Right, let's get into the interview. Aurora Winter is the multi-award-winning author of non-fiction business books and teen fantasy novels, as well as a publisher, TV producer, and serial entrepreneur. So welcome to the show, Aurora.
It's so great to be on the show with you, Joanna.
Oh, no, I'm excited to talk to you. But first up, tell us a bit more about you and how you got into writing and publishing.
Well, my life changed when I was just 9 years old, and I first read the Narnia series by C.S. Lewis. And as I reached for the last book in that series, I just felt such a thrill of anticipation, but also anticipatory grief. And I realized in the moment that my little 9-year-old hand touched that book, that writers are kinds of wizards. That with just ink on white paper, we can transport the reader to another place in time, even somewhere that doesn't even exist. And in that moment, my little 9-year-old heart decided I would do whatever it took to become a great writer like C.S. Lewis. I'm still working on that. And then C.S. Lewis changed my life a second time. After my husband died suddenly, when he was only 33 and our son was 4, I read C.S. Lewis's book, A Grief Observed, which was later made into a movie. And that book so touched me because he was willing to share those mad midnight moments. And it allowed me to feel like it's okay, I can get through this. So 2 times, once when I was 31, once when I was 9, C.S. Lewis changed my life. And he was already dead. So what better way to leave a lasting legacy and help other people than to write books? What better way to uplift, inform, and inspire others?
But how did you get from, I guess, that the 9-year-old who really wanted to write, we're going to come back to the grief, but you have had loads of businesses. As I said, you're like a serial entrepreneur. You've done loads. So was it a case that, like many of us, it was just not a proper job to go into writing? Like, how did you end up back in writing?
Exactly. When I went to university, my father, who's an economist, scoffed at me when I said that I wanted to major in English. He's like, there's no money in that. Do something sensible. So I studied economics. I have an MBA now. And yet I always had this passion for writing. So I took a minor in languages and literature. And I never stopped writing. I was writing journals, or as a 9-year-old, I wrote little illustrated stories that never got beyond chapter 3. And then eventually one thing leads to another. I actually got sick. to be honest. I was running a profitable business with my husband. We had launched a yacht sales company. It was a 7-figure business. We sold $3 million of boats in 1 week when I was pregnant. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a very lucrative business. And yet my soul was sick. I was missing writing. So I was getting up after my baby was born, I got up at 4 a.m. to write. And then I looked after the baby, and then I did the accounting for the company, and I got sick. I got chronic fatigue syndrome, or Epstein-Barr. And I realized I couldn't put my soul aside forever, that there would be a price to pay. So I went back into writing screenplays. And then this is a little mini miracle. Can you believe it? That a feature film came to shoot in Vancouver, BC, Canada, where I lived at the time. And the production manager for John Badham, who directed the movie Stakeout and Bird on a Wire, called and said, hey, we need to use a boat. Can we rent one of your boats? And my husband, I heard him answering the phone. We don't rent boats. We've got brand new $200,000 boats for sale. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Hang on a second. I'm a screenwriter. Yes, we do rent boats if it's John Badham calling. So my husband skippered the boat and I crewed. And I met Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn. And the first assistant director on that shoot, Peter Marshall, and I became friends. And later he hired me to write the first screenplay that I wrote for real money. So what are the chances that the universe would actually bring that right to me? And then through various other miracles, my life changed and I ended up in film and television.
Wow. Okay, we're going to come back to that. Let's just, and I know it's a difficult topic, but you've written about the death of your husband, and many people listening, I mean, everyone at some point is going to go through grief. And of course, for you, very early, tragic death of your husband. But you've also helped others with grief, which again, you turned your own trouble into helping others. So how can writing help people with difficult times? If people are going through this right now, or it's something that they're suffering, even if they don't want to publish their words, I think that's really important. You know, how can writing help that situation?
Well, you wrote about it so beautifully in Writing the Shadow, Turn Your Inner Darkness into Words, which I highly recommend. I love this book. I have it right by my night table.
Thank you.
Beautiful edition that you did on Kickstarter. What you just said about even if it's not being published, I think that's the first thing to lean into. Write for yourself at first. Don't think about publishing at first, especially if you're writing about grief. Writers pay attention. The act of writing is paying attention. And you would be surprised how you can alchemize pain into wisdom, grief into gratitude, if you take the time to first vent and just get all that stuff out on the page. And then later, for example, my first published book, From Heartbreak to Happiness, which was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer, my hero, was simply my diary of healing through grief. And when I reread my diary, I was floored to notice how many times my prayers had been answered. But I hadn't been grateful at the time because the prayers were answered 3 months later, 6 months later, and I didn't notice. Hey, I had prayed for that. So there is value in writing and in reviewing what you have written that will bring you greater wisdom. So my 90-day challenge for the listeners is write every day, even if for 5 minutes in your journal. Read every day. You can start with reading the book, Writing the Shadow by Joanna Penn. It's amazing. And then review what you have written once a week. If you do that for 90 days, I promise you, your life will transform. You will start to notice the things that you are complaining about. If you're still complaining about something 90 days later, you should do something about it, or you should just stop complaining. You write in your book, Writing the Shadow, about how grateful you were that you were in so much pain working in IT that you finally shifted, right? There's value in pain. And if we're complaining or suffering, either we need to accept, forgive, and release. The past will never change. But we do have the present moment we can change. So there's a great value in writing about grief or any kind of suffering that you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, you said it before about my soul was sick, and sometimes we do have to be in those very difficult places. And I'm not saying, obviously, that people should die, but people do die. That is the reality of life. But turning that, as you said, into gratitude is amazing. I do just want to say there, for reviewing what we've written, I do read back some of my journals from like 20 years ago, and some things never change, but we hope that other things move on, right?
Yeah. Well, I've studied happiness extensively. As you mentioned, I later launched a company called the Grief Coach Academy, which is being run by an amazing woman now, Audrey White. So it continues on, although I've gone on to focus on other things. And I created a systemized process for releasing and transforming grief into gratitude. Anyway, one of the key things that everybody can do, you can do this starting now, and I did it last night, I do it every night, is just list 3 things that you're grateful for. You can write it down, or what I do is as I'm falling asleep, I think about the day and I acknowledge 3 things that happened during the day that I can be grateful for. You can deepen this practice by acknowledging how your character trait or your choices helped lead to that happy thing. For example, last night I was grateful that I just bought a car for my son. He got a nice 2019 BMW i3, and he's like all happy and skippy about it. So I was grateful for the prosperity to be able to help him buy a car. I was grateful that he was so happy. And I noticed that it shifted his identity, which is the highest leverage thing you can do for another person, as Tony Robbins would say. So that is one of the simple things everybody can do. It's a happiness hack. It takes like 3 minutes, and I recommend you do it daily.
Well, actually, on that, I can go even faster. I use notes on my iPhone and I just dictate. And I have found that dictating it means it's almost less repetitive. Some days you're grateful for the same things and you think, is it worth being grateful for this again? But but yes, it is. And those are the things we don't want to change. So yeah, I found dictation actually makes a real difference. So coming back to the film and TV, because I find this really interesting. And you had an interview recently on the self-publishing advice site where you mentioned the importance of writing a book and not a screenplay if you want to pitch for film and TV, which is something I've also learned recently. So can you talk a bit about this, why writing a book is better, because you have written screenplays as well, and give us any other tips for pitching IP to producers that don't involve licensing boats?
Yeah, that's probably not too repeatable. So here's how I can help the listeners. I have a background in film and television. I worked for Canada's largest film and television production company. I worked as a vice president of another production company in the States, in Los Angeles, and I launched my own film and television production company. We raised $5 million to do that and made 8 films. So I have about, 300 hours of production that I was connected with in some ways. My development budget when I was working in Toronto was $1.5 million just to develop projects. And I've never optioned a screenplay from a first-time screenwriter. It did not happen. It doesn't happen. But so many times I would option books. So there is a very common thing in film and television to option a book. So most of the listeners are authors. Take advantage of that. The second thing is I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I know, you cannot copyright an idea. You can only copyright a specific expression of an idea. A book asserts your copyright. I actually had the personal experience of pitching a TV series to a very large U.S. broadcaster that you would know the name of, but I won't say it. And my business partner at the time signed, the release that they make you sign when you pitch something, which basically says we might be pitched something similar. Anyway, they basically stole the idea for the TV series and they made it, but I didn't see a dime. So there's a risk when you're just pitching a treatment or a screenplay that having a book helps mitigate. Also, with the book, you've got something. An unsold screenplay just gathers dust. But a book that could be optioned in a screenplay, you can get awards, sales, proof of concept. You can make some momentum.
Yeah, there's a great book called Hollywood versus the Author, which I always recommend, which tells people how to protect themselves. But I feel like sometimes we focus so much on protecting our work, we don't actually get it in front of people. And I think that's kind of the opposite issue. So any tips on pitching to get our books in front of people?
Well, absolutely. I'm actually going to the Banff Media Festival the beginning of June with two of my clients, because I help people now with their books and help them pitch. So what you want to do is you want to get your pitch down to really clear. So, for example, my fantasy series, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, the pitch is it's basically Harry Potter meets Doctor Who. So you want it to be that tight. And then you can go on from there. And then if somebody's interested, you can tell them a little bit more. So about Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, in addition to saying it's like Harry Potter meets Doctor Who, I can say it won the American Fiction Award for Best Preteen Book, and it won the Reader's Choice Award and several other awards. So already that's enough for somebody to go, you know what, I only do thrillers. I'm not interested in YA fantasy. Or they can say, tell me more. So, for example, I'm meeting with BBC again in a couple of weeks. They expressed interest in a 12-part half-hour series. We'll see if that goes anywhere. Interest is not a deal. Interest is not a green light. But now that I have interest from BBC, I can meet with Paramount or Warner Brothers or Universal or Netflix and say, hey, they're interested. Are you interested? And then we can perhaps get a deal.
Yeah, and it takes so long, doesn't it? This is the other thing I feel people don't realise is that it's also about relationships. And interesting that you got into it because you met that person on the boat all those years ago, and then you got into it, and then things develop. And so I think that's the other thing. If you really want your book and you want to see something on the screen, patience and connections make all the difference.
And there's an interesting story about the Banff Film Festival. So after my husband died, just shortly thereafter, maybe 6 months after, a friend of mine was trying to drag me to a party for people in film in Vancouver. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't feel like it. He's like, you are moping. And I don't blame you for grieving, but you're getting out of the house now. Get dressed. So anyway, I went to the party, ended up sitting beside somebody I didn't know. He said, oh, what do you do? And I told him I was a screenwriter. He's like, oh, well, what are you writing? And I told him what I was writing because I got all excited about it. And he's like, I think you should represent the province of British Columbia and pitch that at the Banff Film and Television Festival. I'm like, what? Who are you? Turned out I happened to be sitting by the head of film for British Columbia, BC Film Commission. Anyway, so then I had a moment of, do I say no or do I say yes? And this is a tip everybody can do. When you are invited to do something outside of your comfort zone, take a deep breath and say yes. So I said yes. And then I got a phone call the next day from a producer. She's like, well, would you mind if I followed you around and did a documentary film of you and a couple of the people who are pitching? And I'm like, okay, yes. So then my shoulder went into spasm like just before the pitch, because I'm like, oh no, I'm going to pitch as a first-time screenwriter who has nothing produced, who has no momentum, who can sell boats though, to 600 film and television executives. And if they miss it because they're not in the room, they can watch it later on national television.
Wow.
But anyway, that pitch for that screenplay created a bidding war, and my agent fielded offers from Spelling and Universal and other places. And that basically ended up changing my life. So the right words at the right time to the right people can change your life. That launched initially a 6-figure deal and then went on to create, well, basically multiple $1 million business, creating film and television. So, and it was all because I was willing to say yes and step into something I was not comfortable about. Later, they used the documentary to teach the art of pitching in the Banff Film School. So that was kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, I also want to note that you are clearly someone who reads a lot of self-help books, is very into self-development. And I think this is a very important thing too. I feel like you've obviously invested in yourself, and by listening, I used to listen to Tony Robbins audios back in the day as well. And by changing your mindset, you changed your actions, and that led to these opportunities. I feel that so often people almost expect these things to happen, but even though you're saying that it happened quite quickly, I feel like you put in a lot of work on yourself in order to be in that position.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, a lot of work on myself. It's a never-ending process. And I remember that at one point you said something like you wanted to be like the female version of Tony Robbins, and I think you're doing a brilliant job of your own
the quiet one
for authors. An introverted one, a little more introverted one. Yeah, it never ends. You know, working on yourself is the most valuable thing you can do.
Yeah, and I noticed that we both have learner and strategic in our top 5 Clifton strengths.
Yes, we have a lot in common there.
Which I thought was interesting because, I mean, we do love learning, and I think this makes all the difference. But just going back to your business, so you have a book called Turn Words into Wealth, Blueprint for Your Business, Brand and Book. Now, it has a lot of ideas about how to make more money with books, but I'm interested because you've done so many different types of writing. What do you see as the difference between the business models of fiction and nonfiction, and how do these play out in your business now?
I think fiction has so many opportunities for movies and merchandising. As I mentioned, BBC is interested in my fantasy series, Magic Mystery in the Multiverse. And if that deal goes, that will be extremely lucrative. And also merchandising, and that's a YA fantasy, a young adult fantasy. So there's so many things in that novel that could be T-shirts, cups, but also there's like some cool magical cuffs, kind of like Wonder Woman cuffs that the protagonist Anna has. So those are merchandising opportunities. Sometimes nonfiction can be turned into movies, like The Secret is an example of that, or Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, which shockingly became a Netflix special. Netflix series, even though English is not her first language, because people like to watch other people who are hoarders tidy up. But generally speaking, you wanted to say something there, Joanna? I heard you laugh.
Well, no, I was just thinking I watched that series.
Yeah, I know. I definitely learned how to fold from her.
Yeah, how to fold. Yeah, exactly.
So nonfiction is stronger at helping you get speaking engagements or getting on podcasts or consulting or training. In fact, nonfiction books can be used to build any business that has some kind of expertise. But both fiction and nonfiction can help you put your hat in the ring for the highest paid profession, which is speaking. So in the book, Turn Words into Wealth, I go in depth into 7 different models to create 7 figures with your business. Not all the models will work for you or for your particular book, but take a look and choose one and then implement it strategically.
Easier said than done, obviously. And I feel like this is something, well, I've embraced who I am at this point, but I'm a multi-passionate creator, and we'll come back to the entrepreneurial side, but I also like to do everything myself, which is a strength and a weakness. So I feel like I have a lot of those streams, but I have to split my attention between the different streams, and thus they each become, I guess, less effective. So have you got any tips for people like me, perhaps, who can do lots of different things and want to create lots of different things, but probably focus is a weakness?
People like you mean people like us? Because I feel like I'm pretty much the same. I have the same strengths and flaws. Although I want to acknowledge that the fact that you write both fiction and nonfiction really helped me give myself permission to start writing fiction again in 2020, because I had taken a pause from that. I wrote fiction when I was writing screenplays, and then I wrote only nonfiction as an author. Okay, so here's some tips for outsourcing. Firstly, bad mistake that I've made. Don't do this. Don't first delegate to your VA. Handle my email. That is a difficult task and not easy to systematize. So instead, assign a repeatable task that can be systematized, tracked, and measured. So then allow some time to train the person and track and measure results. Here's an example. So like 2 months ago, I hired a new virtual assistant, but all I gave her to do is just one task. She only books me on podcasts. And then now that she's got the system down, I could give her more tasks, but how do I measure her results? Like most people have virtual assistants who are working remotely. It's hard to know if they're working 10 hours or 1 hour or 40 hours. So I told her, just track how many podcasts you book. So I know how many she books per month. I know how many hours she's charging. And we both know that is the criteria by which she will be judged. So that is useful. And now that she's got that down, I could give her some other tasks to do. Or another example, I thought this was a rather good use of the strategic. I've got strategic, activator, learner, relator, maximizer. in Clifton Strengths. So I used some of those skills. When I wanted to hire a cover designer for Magic Mystery in the Multiverse, I wanted to have a great cover. But what does it really matter what I think is a great cover? What matters is what kind of covers are actually selling in fantasy. So what I reverse engineered it, and you can do this too, I looked at independently published fantasy books that were bestsellers, using K-Lytics as the research to give me that data. Then I looked at those books, then I looked at their covers, and I looked inside the ones that I liked the covers for the cover designer, and then I contacted that cover designer. So that was more effortful than maybe going through Readsy or 99 Designs or Design Crowd or Upwork, but the result is an award-winning cover that hit the market's bullseye. So those are two little tips that I think listeners can find useful.
How do you find people to help you? How did you find that VA?
I asked my friends, who have you worked with as a VA that you'd recommend?
Okay, so personal recommendations.
Yeah, but I have had actually really good success. I have a great assistant that I found on Upwork who does a lot of behind the scenes. There's so many reformatting, re-uploading books and covers and tweak this. And oh no, we won another award, put that on the thing. So I have somebody that has done that for me and done many covers on Upwork. I have another cover designer I work with on Readsy for a series of legal thrillers that I'm working with the client Michael Stockham on. And he's a New York Times best-selling cover designer. So you can, I think the best thing is not to try to find one person to do everything, but zero in on what is a repeatable task that you need done and who is the best person to do it.
This is definitely one of my weaknesses. I do have some people and I have had other people over the years, but when it's like, well, who's the best person to do this? It's often, well, I am. Clearly, I'm the best person.
I want to comment on that. Yes, we have to get over that. Like I notice with myself, I am a recovering perfectionist, still only partly recovered. And so it does trip me up. Like I know I would be the best person. I wouldn't be the best person to do a cover design, but I would be the best person to book myself on podcasts. And I wanted to be on Joanna Penn's podcast. So I reached out to her personally because it mattered to me. But we have to get over that because there's only so many hours in the day. And like if your time is worth $500 an hour or $1,500 an hour, as Joanna Penn's is probably, then if you're doing $20 an hour tasks, this is not a wise sacrifice because we are sacrificing doing a great job at something. Say Joanna Penn is the only one who can write her thrillers. Nobody else can do that. So if she's also, uploading audios to have her podcast broadcast widely and she could delegate that would be better.
That would be better. Actually, it's really funny. As we record this, I have just finally outsourced my podcast production process only after 15 years.
Okay.
So I get a point for outsourcing. But no, my cleaner was here today. So, this is another point. It doesn't have to be that you outsource stuff around your author business. So for me, paying for a cleaner means that, as you said, I spent that time working on my book. So I feel like there are different things we can do in our lives to value the things that we can do. Sometimes you do have to bootstrap things. So people might not have the money. But one of the first things I did when I started out as an author is I did hire a bookkeeper because I was like, I am not reconciling all of these things. Like that's not something I want to do. So that was my first virtual assistant, was a bookkeeper. So I feel like we do this one thing at a time, right? But as you get more into practice, you can do it more.
And another quick little tip, like I find myself sometimes feeling annoyed and resentful when I'm uploading a book again to KDP because the cover art designer, had a typo or something. And then I catch myself. I'm like, Aurora, you're choosing to do this yourself because you love this fantasy project and it really matters to you and you want to baby it along until it gets a little bit more life. So I coach myself to be grateful in that moment. But if I notice a pattern of ongoing, I can't believe I'm doing this, it's time for me to look for somebody else to do that. For example, my son, Yale, yesterday showed me, he totally made my day because he did a whole bunch of art for the fantasy series on Night Cafe, and the images blew me away, and it gave me this surge of creativity about the project. So, and he's got a bachelor in game art and design, so Bachelor of Science. So he knows how to do cover art and to do it much more quickly than I do, and it gave me such a surge. So there can be a lot of value in delegating as well.
Yeah, I definitely outsource my cover design, although I am having fun with AI art as well. And I think Night Cafe has a lot of AI tools.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, super fun. But just coming back on that, the kind of outsourcing, returning to the screenwriting and pitching things. Now, I think most authors, like 99% of authors, would like an agent to pitch their projects, even if they're an independent author. But that can be a difficult sell, because most literary agents, you're pitching them for the whole book, for all the publishing and things like that. So how are you managing that as an independent author?
Like you, I have freedom as one of my top values. Actually, it's my top value. I think it is for both of us. In the book, Turn Words into Wealth, I go in depth about why I believe that independent publishing and independent pitching and getting over this whole thought that you need a big publisher or you need an agent is the best strategy. So in my experience, it's harder for you or for anyone to pitch an agent than to pitch the project. So I think, in my experience, the most valuable skill is to learn how to use your words so that the right words at the right time can change your life when you say them to the right people. So rather than get caught up in, I think it's like a 1990 mindset that you need an agent or you need a big publisher, why not learn how to pitch? And then maybe you'll join me next year at the Banff Film and Television Festival, or join me at NATPE, or join me in Cannes and pitch it. Then nobody is going to be better at pitching your project than you are, but you do need to practice and you need to decide that it's worth your time. And just really quick on that, it is worth your time. There's a really great book called Significant Objects. They put 100 different objects on eBay with or without a story that added significance. It wasn't a pitch, it was significance. For example, these are my grandmother's pot mitts. I remember coming home from school and she would bake us chocolate chip cookies, and that was amazing. There's no value to me in buying those pot mitts because you had cookies from your grandma, but that it added significance. And the value increase was 27-fold. So adding a story adds value to the listener. I mean, I've shared a few stories today with Joanna Penn. Probably that is one of them is going to stick with you. I don't know which one. But if it's worth the time for somebody like Steve Jobs to practice his Apple launch pitch and presentation for 3 weeks when he is running a huge company, then I think it's worth all of our time as authors to get good at pitching what we're up to.
Do you have any resources that you recommend in terms of books or courses around pitching particularly?
I really like the book Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. I also like what you just said about gratitude and you recording it on audio. Record yourself on video or audio. You'll kind of notice if you pay attention that, oh, I talked too long about that. And then get it tighter and tighter. It's one of the things I do with my clients. Like one of my clients yesterday, he's got a 10-minute meeting with Universal or something. I think it was a big company anyway. So he's practiced what is he going to say in that 10 minutes. And so when you learn about neuroscience, which I studied neuroscience, you want to understand the process of how to pitch something. So there's basically three steps because you need to address the three different brain portions that we have. So he rehearsed this with me yesterday, and you can rehearse with yourself or with a friend. But basically, the first thing to do is address the croc brain. Then second thing to do, address the midbrain. And then the third thing to do is you can then address the cerebral cortex. Most people, especially educated people, try to just address the cerebral cortex, and it's the verbal equivalent of sending a complete stranger an Excel spreadsheet by email. They're not going to open it. So the simple analogy is the croc brain is the ancient reptilian brain. It's looking for, is this sexy? Is this exciting? Is this glittery? Is it something to mate with or snack on? Is it like attractive? So that would be the equivalent of your subject line in an email. So for Magic Mystery in the Multiverse, that equivalent to that is, it's like Harry Potter meets Doctor Who. Also, the two are the very best fantasy bestsellers of all time. Doctor Who is the longest running TV series, just as an aside. Okay. Or with the book Turn Words into Wealth, the title is addressing the croc brain. It's kind of like, what is this about? So people who are interested in turning their words into wealth were like, tell me more. Okay, so your first step addressing the croc brain should be very quick, a couple of seconds. The second step is to address the midbrain. Human beings survived for so long because we were not alone. We survived as tribes, as communities, as families. We are hyper vigilant for social status. So, for example, even being on this podcast with Joanna Penn, it creates social status because Joanna thinks I'm worth talking to. Conversely, if you happen to know me, I think Joanna's worth talking to. So that enhances both of our social status. When you're pitching your book, you want to address the second thing next, the social status. So for Turn Words into Wealth, I say that it's one outstanding nonfiction book of the year in its category, which is publishing. For Magic Mystery in the Multiverse, I say that it won the American Fiction Award Best Preteen Book in 2023, and it also won the Reader's Choice Award in 2023. And in 2024, it won the UK Wishing Shelf, or it was finalist in the UK Wishing Shelf, which is really cool because they have 150 kids actually read the books. Okay, so for whatever your project or book is, what is the second step for you? How could you indicate that other people who are awesome think it's good? Oh, for example, my first published book, From Heartbreak to Happiness, Dr. Wayne Dyer endorsed it. He said, I read every page of this beautiful diary. It touched my heart, and I'm sure it will impact yours. Okay, so each of those is an example of doing the second step around the midbrain. And then the third step, now that you've got people listening, then you can go into more depth about either give them the synopsis or the plot summary or whatever you'd like to do with that. So for Magic Mystery in the Multiverse, it would be Anna is a 13-year-old girl who wants to be an actress. She grew up in Los Angeles. Her father is a very busy and distracted film producer who's off to shoot a movie in Africa. So he sends his daughter, Anna, and his son, Zachary, to London to be with his brother and to go to boarding school while he's busy shooting a movie. So they arrive in London. They're all excited. They want to see the Tower of London. But there's something even more interesting in their uncle's garage. It's this experimental car. He says, just stay away from the experimental car. I've got to go out for a bit. Of course, that's like a magnet. The kids jump in the experimental car. And Anna, who is an optimist and a little bit reckless, fiddles with it and pushes the button to go on a random joyride. This takes the kids off the planet Earth to another planet entirely in the multiverse. And when they land, they get into trouble immediately because their vehicle is out of fuel. And, oh no, they happen to land on somebody and apparently kill her. This gives them instant friends because the person they killed is notoriously evil, and instant enemies because other people are out to get vengeance. So then the rest of the story is about, will Anna be able to get back to planet Earth? Her brother gets kidnapped. Will she be able to save him? And will the forces of evil on Telesora be overcome by Anna and her brother? Or will the reverse happen and we will never see the kids again? So that's what Magic Mystery in the Multiverse is about. So the third step is the longest step, where you give the bit more detail about whatever you're up to. So between each one of these three steps, you want to pause so that the other person has a chance to say something, so that it's more of a conversation. So I go into more detail in Turn Words into Wealth, how to use the neuroscience of communication, but hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I think it's so important. As you say, this is a preteen book, and then someone says, well, actually, I'm looking for horror books, then that's probably not a good match. And so often I feel people are pitching and pitching, but they're not thinking about the person on the other side. So as you say, even you can say one line and then are they actually interested? Or do they completely blank? But I want to come back on social status. Have you found at all that being an independent author has meant that you have a lower social status, or has it just not even been an issue with this?
I used to really worry about that and fretted that was the case. I'm over it now. It's whatever it is, right? I feel like I have status for other things, but I'm not a Colleen Hoover. I don't have a New York Times bestselling author. There's things I don't have. For all of the listeners, there's things that you're strong at. I have launched multiple 7-figure businesses from scratch. That's pretty kick-ass. I've got background in film and television, and that's pretty kick-ass. I have success knowing how to start something from scratch and make it work. That's awesome. And I have written 10 books. That's quite a few. So I'm not willing to care more about what other people think of me than what I think of me. And for me, I'm very independent, very entrepreneurial, freedom-focused person. Why would I want to have a publisher to dilute or mute or change my message? I don't. And in fact, in the book Turn Words into Wealth, I give a number of examples, but the one that I like the most is David Goggins, who wrote the book Can't Hurt Me. He's a Navy SEAL and a long-distance runner, pretty amazing athlete. He met with an agent in New York who told him that if he self-published his book, he'd be lucky to sell 5,000 copies. And he decided to self-publish, and he's dyslexic, so he had to hire a ghostwriter to write it. But then he went on over 1,000 podcasts to market it. And the result is probably made $20 million from his book and his audiobook. He sold over 1 million copies of the book in the first year and 600,000 copies of the audiobook. If he had gone with traditional wisdom, he would have seen a fraction of that, and maybe he wouldn't have been able to afford to spend so much time doing the podcast. Why give up 90% of the revenue? You still have to do 90% of the work.
Yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons for everyone. I didn't know David Goggins had gone indie. That's really interesting. But we're almost out of time. So I do want to just come to a final thing. So in Turn Words into Wealth, you say there is more opportunity and more danger than ever before due to exponential technological, social and economic change. Now, obviously, I talk a lot about surfing this wave of change and AI in particular, direct sales and all of this. So given you're always learning, always changing direction, what are your recommendations for making the most of this extraordinary but also difficult time?
All right, well, I have a couple of tips. First tip, keep listening to the Creative Penn podcast.
I didn't even pay you for this. I mean,
it's true. It's a godsend. It's a godsend for leaning into this with excitement instead of terror. Secondly, have fun. For example, those night cafe images that my son did yesterday for Magic Mystery Multiverse, like they made my day. They were so much fun. And now they've sparked a bunch of things that I'm going to write, just by seeing the images. And I also put them on TikToks, on Aurora Fantasy Books. And then allocate time for learning. This is something I needed to coax myself into because I would get impatient. But when I shifted my mindset and leaned into my learner, Clifton strength, and allocate time for learning, then that helped me reframe it instead of frustrating thing that I had to learn, like a good thing that I had to learn. So a couple of things that I am playing with, pick one of these maybe and do them, is authors.ai, pickfoo.com, Descript. Joanna has talked about ChatGPT and SudoWrite and Pro Writing Aid, or Night Cafe. Like pick one and maybe spend a little time playing with it.
Yeah, I feel like leaning into that curiosity. There are so many things to look at. I mean, for example, music. I'm not into music at all, but a lot of authors are. And there's so many music discovery tools and creation tools that I know people are playing with. And that's not my bag. I don't do that, but I play with the image stuff as well. And of course, the various writing tools. And it's really listening to your curiosity. And if you hate something, don't force yourself. Do the things that are interesting to you. And it might be a challenge at first, but you might discover things you really enjoy.
Exactly right. And the same thing with marketing. Don't try to do all kinds of possible marketing. Double down on the ones that make sense for you. Like I love talking on podcasts. So I do podcasts, I do TikTok, and I do Kickstarter. That's it. Those are my 3 things. I can't do everything. So I picked the 3 things that are the most fun or interesting for me.
Absolutely. Right. So where can people find you and your books and everything you do online?
Oh, thanks for asking, Joanna. Well, I am launching the 2nd book in my Magic Mystery in the Multiverse series. I would love if people would follow me on Kickstarter. You can go to magicmysteryandthemultiverse.com and it will redirect you to Kickstarter when Kickstarter is live. Otherwise, it will give you other goodies when Kickstarter is not live, which is a little tip. If you do a Kickstarter, do a redirect so that you can take advantage of sending people to somewhere else after the Kickstarter is not live. My book, Turn Words into Wealth, which we talked about today, is available on Amazon. And if you'd like some gift videos and a gift Thought Leader Launch Starter Library, you can get that on my website, aurorawinter.com. That's AuroraWinter.com. So thanks so much, Joanna. It was really fun to do this podcast with you.
Oh, no. Thanks so much for coming on, Aurora. That was great. So I hope you found the episode with Aurora interesting and that it made you think about how to expand your author business in different ways. I'd love to know what you think about the interview or about some of the questions I posed in the introduction. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com. Just go to the blog or the podcast page and find the episode. Or you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or message me on X at thecreativepenn or email me, joanna@thecreativepenn.com. Next Monday, I'm talking about preparing your manuscript for pitching agents with Renee Fountain. And of course, even if you are not pitching agents, preparing your manuscript for publication is just as important. So however you choose to publish, you'll find the conversation interesting. In the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at thecreativepenn or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.